Good morning, gentlemen. At the outset, many thanks to Littoral Communications for this opportunity to speak to this august audience. And as Mark Twain once said, that he was given 3 weeks' notice to prepare an ad hoc speech. So here I am, trying to speak on opportunities and developments at Indian cruise terminals and what it holds and augurs for the Indian cruise business in the future. Just as a small introduction, J.M. Bakshi, we have been agents for these principals over the last few years. And as was mentioned, we look after their ships coming across 11 ports in India, including the domestic cruise, which has just recently started operations in September. So what are we going to see today? Firstly, we see the trends in cruise shipping, both global and Indian. The existing infrastructure in India, the typology of cruise ports, and where is India falling a wee bit short, and what can be done for improving the cruise tourism in India. So to see the cruise tourism, I think over the last 7-8 years, a lot has been done for cruise tourism. There have been phenomenal changes as far as port administration, immigration, customs, regulations, and we have got more number of international cruises visiting India. However, there are a few things which fall between stools which need to be taken care of. The world cruise industry, in fact, is worth almost $150 billion US, which sustains almost about 1.8 million jobs worldwide. And this is as per the report of CLIA, which is the Global Cruise Line Association. We see that there is a positive outlook towards the younger generation, and we find that about 66% of the Generation X and 71% of the millennials are venturing out to cruises these days. As we go ahead, about $22 billion worth of investment is coming into environmental sustainability with newer fuels, new technology, cleaner fuels, and therefore we as ports need to be ready to handle all these changes. Of course, notwithstanding the pandemic that hit us last year, about 32 million passengers were expected to cruise all across the world. And our aim is to get maximum percentage out of those back into India. I think all across cruising has been associated with the task of elites or a pleasure of the elites. This is a mindset which actually needs to change and make it a mass market, which I think with the introduction of the domestic cruise is on the rise. Cruise shipping is characterized by the increase in the size of ships from what capacities of about 1,000 passengers way back in the 90s. Today we have ships of over 200,000 tons carrying about over 5,500 to 6,000 passengers. Again, we as ports need to be ready for that. Cruise ships have the ability to anchor in ports which don't have the port infrastructure, and therefore opens a wide option about where these ships can call. More about it a little later. As we see, about 65% of the cruise passengers who come to embark ships, they spend at least a couple of days additionally in the port of embarkation. And that makes their spend in that port almost 3 times than what it is on a normal transit call. Right. As regards India, I think as we said, the change in passenger profile is coming through. More of domestic cruising is coming in. Especially after the pandemic, the cruising to nowhere has been becoming popular. India has this last minute booking syndrome. We always do things at the last moment, and therefore we as Indians have very limited sort of visa on arrival options, and therefore it becomes that much more important that we give them options to cruise within the country. Some ports have got excellent flight connectivity to make cruising work, which is indeed an excellent step. Bookings for weddings and corporate events are increasing, and of course India does have the advantage because we have that nationalistic tourism kind of outlook. We can bring certainly international cruises to India, and in the past, as we mentioned, we have sort of set standards and examples of excellence in operations and crew changes, which we can garner to help international cruises coming here. And of course, in the years to come, I'm sure we have infrastructure improvements coming into place. Now you see, the cruising in India has grown at a rate of about 10% over the last 2 decades, and it will hopefully continue to do the same for the next one as well. The major changes that are happening is that I think the cruise destinations are still predominantly Asian. People fly for a cruise, and most of them are contemporary cruises. The luxury brands are very limited. Indians normally tend to cruise for an average of about 3 to 4 nights, not very longer as the European market. And as mentioned earlier, I think the age of the average age of a cruiser is coming down to between 25 to 40 years. So let's see the existing infrastructure that we have. We have 5 major ports where we have cruise terminals, or they are coming up. Mumbai, Goa, Bangalore, Cochin and Chennai. At Cochin, earlier this year, we inaugurated a major international cruise terminal of world standards, which can cater to about 3,000 to 4,000 passengers a day. In fact, Goa has a dedicated cruise berth where cruise ships can come and berth, and they were very fast to react to make certain infrastructure changes and removing of obstructions here in this in the vicinity of the berth by removing this dolphin, etc., which was a major enhancement to the capacity there. The cruise terminal at Bangalore, it's a small one, caters to about 1,500 passengers a day. You have it at Chennai, one of the oldest cruise terminals, the first to come up. Of course, the cruises in Chennai have reduced over the years for various reasons, not totally pertaining to tourism. Here I would like to mention that the cruise terminal at Mumbai is being completely rebuilt, and hopefully in the next year or so we will have a world-class cruise terminal here in India, in Mumbai, which will be able to cater for at least 2 ships and a total passenger load of about 5,000 to 6,000 a day. So that's going to be a ground plus 3 story terminal. And we are honored as JM Bakshi to have been awarded the PPP contract for operating this terminal. So we look forward to making it a world-class terminal and sort of take it forward. Well, so as regards the status of infrastructure here in India, we have terminals at most major ports, as I mentioned. We have pier lengths good enough to sort of handle at least 2 ships in progress. Of course, certain changes need to be made as regards the bollard strings, because where you have the draft available at various piers to accommodate ships up to about 10 meters draft. You don't have the bollard strength at those piers to sort of handle those, especially in inclement weather. So in a nutshell, I think we have the capacity of handling a maximum of 2 major ships at any port at a given time, which, looking at the standards of, or rather the increase in tourism, is a little limited, and we need to enhance that. We have the cruise terminals at dedicated piers, but the facilities at the alternate ports need to be enhanced to ensure that both the ships are comfortably placed. And therefore, it's like a chicken and egg story. The ports want international cruise lines or domestic cruises to come and sort of call on ports in order to make investments in the port infrastructure, whereas the other way around, the international cruise lines say that show us the infrastructure and we will plan our trip there. So it's a chicken and egg story. Let's see who wins. Okay, let's see the typology of the ports and how competitiveness is measured between various cruise ports. The typology can be broken up between the port element and the tourism element. As regards the port elements, the factors which come into play are the port governance, port development, port function, the port size, and the seasonability. I think across the world, we have seen that the cruise terminals which have actually succeeded are privately owned with massive government support from the back. And therefore, that is the sort of governing factor for Mumbai port and Goa port coming into this PPP arrangement with private players. As far as the port development is concerned, we have the factor is whether it's a dedicated terminal, whether that terminal is being used for other cargo purposes, whether it's a dedicated pier, again being shared with other cargo ships, and whether there are private islands at that place, which we don't have. More about the home porting function, which is an important factor as far as cruise ship operations are concerned. And so when ports, when cruise lines select their itineraries, I think the most important thing to remember here is that cruise lines sell itineraries and not destinations. They have the option of, say, coming to India, and when they come to India, they have the option of calling at least 5 to 6 major ports, and therefore it is the itinerary touching India which is important, and therefore ports which offer the best destinations will, of course, get the honor of hosting these ships. So, if we see these 6 major factors, one is the revenue generation and costs of for the cruise line itself, how much they can earn, and how much is the expense, including the port cost, the fuel costs at various locations. The operational considerations of the geographic locations of the port, how much is the distance between 2 port calls, the infrastructure, and of course what day of the week they call a particular port. And of course the other things that are very common as to which services which ports can provide the best of services. And of course, as a cruise industry, it is a customer-oriented industry. The customer satisfaction ratings are most important for cruise lines, and therefore, even a small thing which can hinder their customer satisfaction is a no-go. Now, home porting is something that India has been looking into. Mumbai has had the privilege of home porting a Costa line and a Carnival cruise line, and a Royal Caribbean cruise line here in Mumbai. There were smaller numbers, small ships, about 2,500 to 3,000 passengers, and therefore we are looking at larger ships coming into Mumbai and other ports of the country. Now, some of the factors that actually govern this is, of course, proximity to an international airport so that people can fly in and out. The port dues for cruise passengers and cruise ships, I think, which the government has made an excellent step towards reducing the port dues substantially, even in the last 1 year, and that hopefully will sort of be an incentive for cruise lines to call Indian ports. Time for passenger clearance procedures, security, comfort of cruise passengers, of course, which also deals with, again, customer satisfaction, your berth allocation system at various ports, and which we need to be adaptive to various changes, short notice changes from the cruise line. Now, as far as the seasonality of cruise industry's itineraries is concerned, I think there are three predominant ones, which is the perennial, seasonal, and repositioning, which India falls into, of course, the seasonal one, where our cruise season is basically from October to May. Now, we have so many ports here in India. We have several ports in the vicinity of India, both to our east and west, and therefore, again, what determines the factors for a cruise line to select a port? So, we need again to understand that it is a demand-derived industry. The cruise lines will go where the passengers want to go, and not the other way around. And therefore, again, the infrastructure and the facilities which are there at various ports, the security level, especially in this scenario of the pandemic, and otherwise the physical security is a governing factor. We have these smaller exotic ports, which are must-see or marquee ports, which are available but need to be possibly projected to the cruise line industry. So coming to the tourism element of it, I think it's the attractiveness of the ports, as we said, your the local and regional integration being the destination port, where you would have the port where you have the embarkation or the disembarkation or the turnaround of ships, or a gateway port, which is only a transit port, and which are a combination of the two. India, as we said, as even Captain Singh mentioned, there is no dearth of tourism facilities or elements in India, and we have anything and everything that's available on a platter in one place, from deserts to mountains to rivers to wildlife here in India. So to summarize, what are the drivers of a cruise vessel deployment? Starting from the factors of home ports, the length of the cruise, destination ports with regard to the tourism facilities, the day of the departure of the cruise line, your operating costs, safety, and what kind of demography are we going to serve. I think relationship with cruise lines of these ports are, I think, the biggest challenge, and that needs to be addressed at the earliest, because the alignment of priorities of cruise ports and the cruise lines is important when it comes to sort of organizing excursions and other facilities. Coordinating with various service providers and authorities is important. When you have a long-term engagement with a cruise line, that's an indication of their commitment and the port's prospect as a region. And if you just have one transit call or a few calls here and there, that needs to be changed to a long-term commitment. Of course, the requirements of various ports and cruise lines is changing because of the pandemic, and therefore we have to be dynamic with the changes in procedures in the infrastructure and the facilities that we provide at these ports. The berth allocation and confirmation is a critical factor, because cruise lines plan out their cruises almost 2 years in advance, and it's not that they just pull it out of their sleeve and say we are coming in the next month. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I think there are some major changes that are happening across the world as regards the usage of liquefied natural gas, that is LNG, your exhaust cleaning systems, advanced wastewater treatment systems, and of course the ship-side shore power, which again the ports need to be ready and be prepared for. There are various innovations taking place on board as regards the digitization of the whole process, right from the time a person checks in or books his ticket. I think it's becoming a no-touch procedure, and therefore starting from your things at the pier right till on board, you have a digitized process. Now, if you see from this slide, what does this slide show? I think we have, ports that we compete with in the west. That's Dubai, Muscat, Fujairah, and in the east, Singapore, Penang, Phuket, Yangon, and therefore, if you see the share of cruises or port calls in various ports around the region, you will find that India is very way behind. And therefore, where are we, I think, falling short? We need to see that yes, the policies and regulations need to be promulgated well in time and give a lead time to the cruise lines to operate. There are too very many checks and balances which cause irritation to passengers, which need to be eased. I think all governmental agencies have a stake in security. The cruise lines and their agents in India respect that to the core, and we will ensure that the security is in no way compromised. And that is the reason why there is a sort of a lack of trust between the cruise lines and the agents and the countries, because they feel that a lot of additional burden is being put on their finances and operational capability. As far as ships are concerned, in fact, ships, as I said, book almost 2 years in advance, and therefore they need to be sort of confirmed and shown, told well in advance that their berths are ready. We have cruise berths being shared by cargo vessels, which of course in a seasonal cruising nation like India, it is inevitable. But for that period where cruise ships are going to call, we need them to be that much more dedicated. So what can we do about this? Basically, the aim is to get cruising back to India as soon as possible. We find that pockets in the Caribbean, in the Mediterranean, Southeast Asia have started. China, the cruising has started. We haven't started international cruising in India yet, and I'm sure that will be at short notice, which again is a hindrance because cruise lines need preparation time. And as I mentioned before, the 40 to 60% reduction in cruise tariff, in fact last year, has been a massive boon for the cruise lines. Yes, I do understand that the major ports are giving this at the expense of a substantial amount of their income, and therefore we need to capitalize on getting more and more cruise lines to come and visit Indian ports. The structured bankable PPP options, as has been done in Mumbai and Goa, is a good step. I think that is what will take India ahead. I think the digitization and the reduction in documentation to sustain the ease of doing business is paramount, because that puts an additional operational stress and strain on the crew of a ship which is calling India before it actually comes in. Well, we have been exploring new and sort of alternative ports across the country on the east and west coast. Ports in Gujarat, ports in Maharashtra, in Kerala, Orissa, where although you don't have a complete infrastructure, you have a facility where ships can come and anchor and use their own tenders to go across. But that has to be coupled with, again, governmental organizations like immigration and customs who can sustain or sort of help make that visit a success. The government had given exemption from collection of biometrics of cruise passengers, which expired in December 2020, which I'm sure the authorities would be looking at the extensions. So basically, we need to develop these infrastructures wherever it is possible and make dedicated cruise terminals. And it has to be done with sort of consultation with key players, and the fact that we have got, we as JM Bus has got involved with the Mumbai Cruise Terminal almost 1 year before its operationalization is a good step, and we'll hopefully be able to make it work. Another important factor is if we can sort of integrate this coastal cruising with river cruising, which is already existing in the north and the northeast region, that will help. As I said, we need to streamline the processes across ports, the immigration processes, expedite the issue of various passes, your visa requirements. I think between Singapore and Thailand, they have a agreement where people they honor each other's on arrival sort of issuance of visas, and therefore, if we can work out with, say, Singapore or Dubai, honoring their visas on a reciprocal basis, it will be a fantastic thing. As I said, minor ports excursions, and for all this we need an effective media campaign and a marketing strategy to make it work. If you see, this slide shows how the international cruise lines have reacted to various sort of activities or actions that have been taken by the government. You find in 2015-16 a major cruise line got home-ported here in Mumbai, calls went up. Then the composite tariff came into place in 2017. Again, the calls went up. We had the customs duty being imposed in October 2018. You see the drop in the number of calls, and then thereafter, of course, the pandemic hit. But notwithstanding the fact, from 2022 onwards till 24-25, we have started getting bookings, which is a very positive sign. So ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to an incredible India. Try and make cruise tourism that much more sustainable. And that's it. Should you have any more questions, would be happy and glad to answer. Any questions? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I have my team here, Rakesh and Saket here, who are here with me from JM Bakshi for any interaction or